Hello everyone. So in today's video, we're going to be going to two different Costco's in two different countries in one day. And the way how I'm going to do this is we're going to cross over into Vermont and do shopping there and picking up the items that the average family would want to purchase. I'm talking dairy, grains, meats, and different items. And then we're going to do the same thing here in Quebec and compare the two basket of prices to see where the cost of living is going to be higher, either in the United States or here in Canada. So without further ado, let's hit the road and get on with the experiment. One of the things that I really want to do for this video is that I want to try to make it as scientific as possible. So I've gone out of my way to prepare a list of all of the items that we're going to be buying in Costco USA and Costco Canada. And the goal is to try to select the brands that are the same in both countries, and where possible to try to get the same size of packaging. But in situations where one store might have a certain brand or a certain size of packaging where the other one doesn't, we'll just compare the brands that are the most similar and then compare the price on a cost per unit basis. And then at the very end of this video, I'll do all of the math conversions. We'll convert everything to US dollars so that we can get a conclusion as to which Costco is going to be less expensive. So that's my goal. 45 minutes later, we arrived at the Canada-USA border, and to our benefit, the lineup was rather short while crossing into the beautiful state of Vermont. 2 hours, 135 kilometers, and one border crossing later, we would arrive to the closest American Costco in Colchester, Vermont. Upon arrival, and like in most Costcos I have been to, finding parking was pretty chaotic. Not only that, but when you fast forward, our return trip to Costco Canada was even more challenging as a winter storm had developed. But I digress. Despite these challenges, Costco members still visit on a regular basis on account of the great variety of products available at Costco. These include name brand clothing, name brand electronics, furniture, and even household appliances. Outside of food items, one of the major price differences we so happened to notice was for a Tommy Hilfiger coat that was selling at a price of $25 US. We were actually quite surprised to find the identical jacket selling at Costco Canada for the equivalent of $67 US. Considering the province of Quebec is the most taxed province in Canada, this $67 price mark would also be subject to an additional sales tax of 14.98%, which would bring the total price of the Canadian variant coat to $77.60 US, resulting in a total price difference of $52.60. So in this case, Costco USA had the less expensive product, even though again the jackets were completely identical. For the sake of simplicity, we will just exclude the tax element from our remaining calculations. To be strategic in our approach, I will be going through my grocery list by food group, starting with fruits and vegetables, which arguably is the food category that has seen the highest increase in cost over the past couple years. First up on the list are the controversial avocados. While this fruit is commonly loved by most, I fall into the category of weird people who just dislikes them. For you Canadians though, who love them, they actually turned out to be cheaper up north compared to the United States. $1.48 per avocado in the US versus $1.25 per avocado in Canada. Cara Cara navel oranges were in season and also turned out to be cheaper in Canada. In the United States, they were selling for $1.20 per pound versus $1.11 per pound in Canada. Red seedless grapes also sold less per pound in Canada compared to the United States. $2.99 per pound in Costco USA versus $2.95 per pound in Costco Canada. So, for the 3 fruit items that were added to my grocery list, they all turned out to be cheaper in Canada, but let's see if this trend also continues with the vegetables. Packaged broccoli was selling for $2.90 per pound in the United States versus $2.62 per pound in Canada. For the romaine lettuce, the brand and the packaging were actually identical between the two countries, and even here, they turned out to be cheaper in Canada. $1.08 per head of lettuce in the United States versus 87 cents per head of lettuce in Canada. For bell peppers, both countries had the same price, $1.50 per pepper. Yellow onions were a similar turnout, 80 cents per pound in the United States versus 52 cents per pound in Canada. Similar to the romaine lettuce, the brand and the packaging for the potatoes were identical for both countries, yet they still sold for cheaper in Canada, $1.60 per pound in the United States versus $1.12 per pound in Canada. At this point, I think it's safe to assume that for fresh produce, you would be getting a better deal in Canada. However, things start to change tide when we get into the dairy category. On my way over to a few of the dairy products, I did what every Costco member would do and stopped at a few of the free sampling stations spread throughout the store, which is a signature to all of the Costco branches. Something that most Americans have found strange about milk in Canada is that larger quantities are sold in milk bags as opposed to the plastic milk jugs commonly used in the United States. I am not sure if this is what also contributes to the difference in price, but regular milk tends to be cheaper in the United States versus in Canada. In my particular example, 2% milk in the United States was selling for 88 cents per liter versus $1.42 per liter in Canada. So there is quite the difference in price here. Identical Kirkland brand almond milk was sold in both of the Costcos. However, the American variant was still slightly cheaper at $1.41 per liter versus $1.45 per liter in Canada. One stick of salted butter was almost 18% more expensive in Costco Canada compared to the Costco in the United States, with a unit price of $3.50 per pound in the US versus $4.12 per pound in Canada. Perhaps the most staggering price difference in the dairy category was for Kirkland branded shredded mozzarella cheese. On a per pound basis, the American variant was $2.60, while the Canadian variant was $5.89 per pound. This represents a 126% higher cost for the same branded product, so quite the shocker there. Last on the dairy list was Kirkland branded plain Greek yogurt, which sold for $2 per pound in both Costco USA and in Costco Canada. So, while fresh produce was cheaper in Canada, dairy products were definitely more expensive compared to the United States. Now, before we jump into the protein section, let's talk about the price of gasoline. It just so happens that both of the Costcos we visited also had a station for selling fuel, which is another one of the great perks to owning a Costco membership card. From what I have personally seen, in general, gasoline tends to be slightly cheaper at Costco compared to the traditional vendors. But how does it compare between Costco Canada and Costco USA? Well, on the day that I compared the two prices, gasoline was cheaper at the Costco USA by almost 39%, $2.99 per gallon in the United States versus $4.15 per gallon in Canada. So there was also a meaningful price difference here. It's important to note, however, that Quebec's higher taxes are already baked into the per gallon price, so the higher tax rate in Quebec also contributed to the larger price difference. Also, please do keep in mind that if you haven't been keeping your own tally up until now, I will be calculating a grand total for each Costco to determine which store in which country turned out to be cheaper overall. Now, let's dive into the protein section, which overall had some mixed results. Now, many families will pop into Costco just to get their famous cooked rotisserie chicken, which certainly comes in handy, especially after a long day's work. By most standards, I would consider the price of the rotisserie chicken to be relatively cheap, considering it's a ready-to-eat meal. Prices in Costco USA was set to $4.99 per rotisserie chicken versus $5.99 in Canada, so pretty affordable in both countries, but less expensive in the United States. Ironically, the whole raw chicken seemed to cost more despite it being uncooked. A bit of a head scratcher there, but in any case, compared to Canada, the whole raw chicken was cheaper in the US at $1.49 per pound versus $2.21 per pound in Canada, which turns out to be 48% more expensive for the Canadian variant. Similarly, chicken breast was $2.99 per pound in the US versus $5.10 per pound in Canada, or 70% more. For lean ground beef, The US takes the win yet again, with it being $4.99 per pound in the US versus $6.61 per pound in Canada. Interestingly enough, when you zoom into the label for the US Atlantic farmed salmon, you will see that it is cheaper than the Canadian variant despite it being imported all the way from Chile. The Canadian variant of the salmon, however, was a product of Canada and not imported, yet it cost almost 9% more, $9.99 per pound in the US versus $10.88 per pound in Canada. Canada finally snags a win in the protein category, with canned tuna being cheaper at $3.70 per pound in Canada versus $4.50 per pound in the US. Now, I don't know about you, but I've noticed that eggs in general are one of the food items that has had a sharp price increase over the past couple years. While I do find them to be pricey overall, you probably won't be surprised by the fact that they are still cheaper in the US at $2.15 per dozen versus $4.61 per dozen in Canada. This is a whopping 114% higher price tag in Canada. Keep in mind though that both sets of eggs used in this example were Kirkland brand and also cage free. However, the version in Canada was also labeled as being organic. So this could also be the leading factor that contributed to such a large price difference between the two stores. So let's recap. Up until now, we have figured out that fruits and vegetables are cheaper in Canada, while dairy and protein related items are cheaper in the United States. So this clearly puts the US in the lead for having the cheaper basket of grocery items. However, there still remains two more categories where Canada can still catch up: nuts and grains, as well as everyday snacks and condiments. While I am limiting my list to these 5 food categories, Costco is still known for a lot more. They have an entire section dedicated to pharmaceutical products to get any needed medication. They also have an assigned section for eye and ear health. If you ever want to purchase a vacation package, you can also do that with Costco Travel online. So I can definitely see why there is such an appeal to becoming a Costco member. Now, let's quickly compare the nuts and grains category. For similar whole grain bread, Canada snagged the win here for having the lower price. On a per pound basis, the US variant was selling for $2.84, while the Canadian variant had a price of $2.04 per pound. Both stores carried Kellogg's Frosted Flakes and also came in at a very similar price, with the American variant just edging it out at $2.32 per pound versus $2.36 per pound in Canada. Identical organic pasta sold for $1.51 per pound in the United States versus $1.70 per pound in Canada, so also very close here, but still another win for the American variant. For comparable all-purpose flour, Canada came out cheaper at 34 cents per pound versus 38 cents per pound in the United States. Kirkland branded jasmine rice came in equal at both stores with a price of 76 cents per pound. Almonds sold for $2.99 per pound in Costco USA, while it sold for $3.61 per pound in Canada. Unsalted cashews were also cheaper in the US at $4.99 per pound versus $5.12 per pound in Canada. So the nuts and grains category was very close between the two stores. However, if we are going to count every nickel and every dime, the win would still go to Costco USA for this category. So a win nonetheless, but not to the point where it will make a big difference in your overall budget. Now we finally arrive to the last category: everyday snacks and condiments. While it would require quite a large difference in price for Costco Canada to make a comeback, we will still finalize this category and find out officially which Costco turned out to be cheaper, and by exactly how much. Nutella, the hazelnut spread adored by many, was priced lower in Canada at $2.73 per pound versus $3.50 per pound in the US. Canada takes the win yet again with regular creamy peanut butter priced at $1.77 per pound in Canada versus $1.83 per pound in the US. Costco Canada retains the lead in this category, selling pure wildflower honey at $2.73 per pound versus $3.19 per pound in the US. Sugar, once again, was priced lower in Canada at 50 cents per pound versus 79 cents per pound in Costco USA. So the sweet and the salty also came out cheaper in Canada, with Kirkland brand sea salt priced at $1.80 per pound in Canada versus $2.13 per pound in the US. On a per liter basis, canola cooking oil came in at $2.29 per liter at Costco USA versus $2.47 per liter at Costco Canada. Cape Cod kettle cooked chips, which are one of my favorites, were priced equally at $4 per pound in either country. Kirkland branded cookies were priced at $3.16 per pound in Canada versus $4.44 per pound in the United States. And last but not least, Coca-Cola Zero Sugar was priced at 34 cents per can in Canada versus 54 cents per can in the United States. So clearly, when it comes to snacking or simply amplifying the flavor of your food, Costco Canada would seem to be the cheaper alternative. So this would leave Costco USA with 3 cheaper categories versus 2 categories for Costco Canada. But let's calculate the total per unit cost for both countries. When you tally up the total per unit cost, whether that's per item, per pound, or per liter, you would get a total per unit cost of $96.64 for all of the items we selected at the Costco USA we visited. When you make the same calculation for the Costco Canada we visited, you get $105.08 per unit. This represents an 8.73% higher cost in Canada on a per unit basis for the basket of items we selected. However, the total bill in the United States, excluding taxes, came up to $407.58, where the Canadian total came out to $402.39, which is actually a lower number compared to the US. So you're probably wondering why the total bill came out to be higher in the United States despite it having the lower per unit cost. Well, the answer to this question is that the average size of the packaging was larger in the United States when compared to Canada. So even though the per unit cost was lower in the United States, the average size of the packaging tended to be larger, resulting in a larger total price because you technically would be buying more, which would make sense. So, while there is a noticeable price difference between the 2 Costcos we visited, it would not really be worth it for the time and the gas to cross from Canada over into the US to save a few dollars in your weekly grocery bills. But just for the sake of having a road trip and discovering new products, it would still make for a fun activity. So if you enjoyed this video and would like to see more travel-related content, be sure to support the channel simply by hitting the like and the subscribe button, as it really goes a long way in helping with the growth of the channel so I can bring you more content. Be sure to also drop your comments down below, as I do enjoy hearing your thoughts or personal experience on the subject. With that being said, I would like to say a big thank you for taking the time to watch this video, but until the next one, take care for now.